Okay, so today we're gonna kind of shift gears a bit and look at a place that's got a pretty awesome nickname, Devbhoomi.
Devbhoomi.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense when you know what it means. Like, have you ever heard that before?
I have, yeah. It means land of the gods, right?
Exactly, land of the gods. So right away, we're dealing with somewhere pretty special in India, right? Like spiritually significant. And we've got this Hindi document here. It's pretty cool. It basically lays out the whole history of this region, but like in a way that's not overwhelming, you know?
Yeah, it does a really nice job of weaving together like all the different threads. You've
Yeah.
got the mythology, the actual history of like kingdoms and rulers,
Yeah.
but then also how people lived and what they believed and like how that all kind of comes together to make Uttarakhand what it is today.
Totally. So I'm thinking for this deep dive, our mission is to like pull out the juiciest bits of history from this document and give our listeners a clear picture of how Uttarak came to be.
A shortcut to understanding this super important region.
Exactly. And to do that, we're going to follow the timeline the document lays out, starting with the ancient stuff and working our way up to the present day.
Sounds good.
So we're talking mythological origins, ancient kingdoms, like all these rulers and dynasties. Then we get to this crazy period with the Gorkhas and the British coming in. And then how Uttarakhand fought to become its own state after India got independence. And of course, we got to talk about why Uttarakhand is such a big deal today.
Lots to cover.
Oh, yeah. Let's jump right in. So this document takes us like way back, right? It talks about Uttarakhand being mentioned in the Vedas and Puranas, which are basically like the bedrock of Indian tradition, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that right there tells you this isn't just some place that popped up recently. This is a land with, like, seriously ancient roots. And
Yeah.
it's been revered for centuries upon centuries.
And it really sets the stage for understanding its spiritual significance. The document talks about how during the time of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, which are these epic stories, Uttarakhand was like a sanctuary for sages and ascetics.
A place where people went to seek enlightenment.
Exactly. You can almost picture it, right? Like these remote landscapes in the Himalayas, and you've got all these hermits and spiritual seekers meditating in caves, just like totally immersed in their practice.
It's like a spiritual haven. And, speaking of spiritual significance, we can't forget the pilgrimage sites, right? The document highlights the Chardham Yatra, which is this incredibly important pilgrimage for Hindus. And it includes 4 sites: Kedarnath, Badrinath, Yamunotri, and Gangotri. And guess what? They're all in Uttarakhand.
It's like the ultimate spiritual journey for so many people. And it's not just about visiting these places, it's about like connecting with something deeper, something bigger than yourself. And when you're talking about spirituality in Uttarakhand, you got to mention Rishikesh and Haridwar, right? They're both located along the Ganges River, which is like the most sacred river in Hinduism.
Hmm.
The document talks about how they've been centers for yoga and spiritual practices for like forever.
Oh, yeah. Rishikesh is like the yoga capital of the world, pretty much.
Oh, totally. So we've got this really strong spiritual foundation, but eventually this area also started to develop more defined like political structures,
Yeah.
kingdoms and all that. So let's talk about that transition.
Okay, so the document takes us to the ancient and medieval periods, and this is where we see the rise of different ruling dynasties in the 2 main regions of Uttarakhand, Kumaon in the east, and Garhwal in the west.
Gotcha. So like different rulers in different parts of the region.
Right. And first up, we've got the Katuri dynasty. They ruled in Kumaon from around the 7th to the 11th century, and their capital was in Baijnath, which is near Elmora. One of the cool things about them is that they built all these incredible stone temples.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they left behind this, like, legacy of really impressive architecture, which shows that, the region was flourishing culturally during that time.
Okay, so stone temples, Katuri dynasty, got it. What came next?
So then you have the Chan dynasty. They were a pretty big deal in Kumaon. They ruled for a really long time, from the 11th to the 18th century, and they established Almora as their capital.
Okay, so Almora is like their big claim to fame.
Yeah, and it's still a really important historical city today. You can see a lot of their architectural influence there. So the Chans were a major force in the region for centuries.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about Garhwal? What was happening over there while all this was going on in Kerman?
So in Garhwal, you have the Panwar dynasty, and their capital was Srinagar. Now, this isn't the Srinagar in Kashmir that everyone knows. This is a different Srinagar located in Garhwal.
Ah, okay, two different Srinagars. Got it.
Right, and the Panwar rulers were known for, like, supporting art and literature. Their history is pretty interesting, with periods of both peace and conflict with their neighbors.
Now that you mention that, I'm curious. Did the Kuman and Garhwal kingdoms ever, like, clash with each other? I mean, before the Gorkhas came along?
That's a good question. The document mentions that there were definitely times when they were rivals, competing for control of important trade routes and resources in the Himalayan foothills. But there are also times when they formed alliances, probably for strategic reasons.
So a little bit of both. Makes sense.
Yep. But then everything changed with the arrival of the Gorkhas.
Right, the Gorkhas. So 1803, they invade and take control of both Garhwal and Kuman. That must have been a pretty wild time for the people living there.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge upheaval. The Gorkhas, even though they didn't rule for that long, they implemented significant changes. They changed the land revenue system, reorganized the military, and, some of those changes actually had lasting effects even after the British took over.
Interesting. So their influence, even though it was relatively short, it still had a pretty big impact.
Yeah, for sure. But their expansionist policies, like trying to take over more and more territory, eventually led to conflict with the British East India Company. And that set the stage for the Anglo-Nepalese War, which lasted from 1814 to 1816.
And that's when the British defeated the Gorkhas, right? I mean, that's pretty well known.
Yep. The British came out on top, which, as you can imagine, had a massive impact on the region. The document explains how Kuman and Eastern Garhwal were annexed by the British and became part of this new province called the Kuman province. But here's the interesting part. Teri Garhwal, which was in the western part of Uttarakhand, remained a princely state.
So, like, it was still ruled by a local ruler, but under the watchful eye of the British.
Exactly. They had to acknowledge British supremacy. So it's interesting, right? You have these different parts of what we now know as Uttarakhand experiencing British rule in very different ways.
And I bet that had some lasting effects on how the region developed.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right.
So then we fast forward to 1947, India gains independence, and what happens to Uttarakhand? Well, all those different parts, the former British territories and the princely state of Teri Garhwal, they all get merged into the state of Uttar Pradesh.
Okay. But from what I'm gathering, people in Uttarakhand, they weren't necessarily thrilled about being just a part of Uttar Pradesh, right?
You got it. There was this growing sense of, like, we're different. We have our own unique culture, our own challenges living in the Himalayas, and we want to be in charge of our own development. The document talks about all these movements that started popping up, advocating for a separate state.
So like a real grassroots effort.
Oh, yeah. And it wasn't easy. I mean, it took decades of pushing and fighting for their voices to be heard. The document talks about the sacrifices people made, the dedication they showed. It was a long and difficult struggle.
But eventually all that hard work paid off, right? They did get their own state.
They did. On November 9th, 2000, Uttarakhand, which they initially called Uttaranchal, officially became the 27th state of India.
Wow. That must have been a huge moment for the people who had fought so hard for it.
Absolutely. It was the combination of years of effort and a testament to their strong sense of regional identity.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from ancient myths to powerful dynasties to the Gorkhas, the British, and finally Uttarakhand becoming its own state. So now let's talk about what Uttarakhand is like today.
Okay, so the document paints a picture of modern-day Uttarakhand. It mentions that Dehradun is the summer capital, and Garsane is the winter capital.
Two capitals. Interesting.
Yeah, it's because of the diverse geography and climate of the state. You've got everything from high mountains to valleys, so they actually shift the capital depending on the season.
That's pretty cool. And of course, Uttarakhand is known for its stunning natural beauty, right? Like the Himalayas, the mountains, the rivers. It's pretty much a nature lover's paradise.
Oh yeah, it's breathtaking. And the document talks about how tourism and pilgrimage are huge parts of the state's identity today. Which makes sense, right? You've got these incredible landscapes, snow-capped peaks, lush valleys, and of course those ancient pilgrimage sites we talked about earlier.
So it's a big draw for both tourists and spiritual seekers.
Exactly. And all those visitors, they have a big impact on the state's economy and infrastructure. But it's not just about the scenery. Uttarakhand also has a very distinct Himalayan culture with its own traditions, languages, and art forms.
Oh, right. It's got its own unique cultural flavor.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's the yoga and spiritual wellness scene. Uttarakhand is known worldwide as a hub for that kind of stuff. Rishikesh, for sure. But it's all over the state. So you've got this really interesting mix of ancient traditions and modern life in Uttarakhand.
It sounds like a pretty special place.
It is. And for anyone who's thinking about visiting, the document lists some of the key cities and towns. You've got Haridwar, Rishikesh, Nainital, Almora, Mussoorie. Each one has its own vibe, its own history, and something different to offer visitors.
Cool. So I think we've covered a lot here, from the ancient myths to the modern day. But if we had to sum it all up, what are like the big takeaways from this deep dive into Uttarakhand's history?
I think the big picture is that Uttarakhand's identity has been shaped by centuries of devotion, the spiritual side of things, and then also all the different rulers and powers that have come and gone, and of course, its connection to the Himalayas, to the natural environment.
Okay, so spirituality, politics, and nature. Those are like the three big forces that have molded Uttarakhand.
Yeah, I think so. The ancient myths and stories laid the foundation for its spiritual significance, and that still draws people to the region today. Then you have all the different dynasties, the Katiras, the Chans, the Panwars, each one leaving their mark. And then, of course, the Gorkhas and the British, they also left their mark, and that had a huge impact on how the region developed. And finally, achieving statehood, that was a major turning point for Uttarakhand. It allowed them to finally have control over their own destiny.
Right. So each period, each influence, it's like it added another layer to the story of this place.
Exactly. And what we see today is this amazing blend of the ancient and the modern, the spiritual and the worldly.
It really is a unique place.
It is. And as we wrap up here, I want to leave our listeners with a thought. We've explored this incredible history, this rich tapestry of events and influences, but there's always more to discover, right? So what aspects of Uttarakhand, what stories, what places, what traditions, what piques your curiosity? Is it the Khatiri dynasty and their stone temples? Is it the Chardam Yatra and the spiritual significance of those pilgrimages? Is it the Yuga and Himalayan culture that continues to thrive there? Whatever it is, I hope this deep dive has given you a good starting point for exploring Uttarakhand further.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely sparked my interest. There's so much to learn about this land of the gods.
That's for sure.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Until next time.